As we got close to Father's Day, my grandson Manny became curious about my father, Manny's great grandfather. Manny had figured he must have been a pretty good guy because his mom and his Aunt Rachel frequently talk very fondly of their Papa Crane. My daughters were very close to their papa, and he just adored them. Knowing that I had served in combat in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot, Manny went on to ask me, "Did Papa Crane serve in a war like you did in Vietnam, Papa?" "He certainly did, Manny. And let me tell you, my dad, he was what people call a real war hero. He was in a big war. They called it World War II. I'm sure you've heard about that big war in your history classes. You know, Manny, there is so much I could tell you about my dad. As you can see, I'm very proud of him. I'm proud to be his son. I'm especially proud because he gave me his name. My name is exactly the same as his, but with a junior at the end of it. For me, the gift from my dad of his name is a great honor. So why don't you go get a Mountain Dew out of the fridge and maybe a string cheese and sit down here at the table with me for a minute and let me tell you a great Father's Day story. A story this Father's Day about Papa Crane Sr., my dad. First of all, Manny, I gotta tell you, my dad's last name of Crane became sort of famous over the years, purely by coincidence, of course, but in a sort of funny way. Here's what I mean. Whenever I introduce myself to someone for the first time, I often get a response that goes something like this.
My name is Bob Crane. How are you doing?
Good, Bob Crane. I've heard that name before. Hey, are you related to the Bob Crane that played on Hogan's Heroes?
Manny responded, "Hey, Papa, I know that show too. I've seen that show on old TV reruns. It's actually a pretty good one too. Kind of a funny war story. But Papa, are you really related to that actor Bob Crane that plays that crazy colonel on Hogan's Heroes?" You see, there you go, Manny. That's what I'm talking about. Everybody wants to think that. But when I get asked that question, here's what I tell them. I say, no, I'm not related to that Bob Crane, the actor, but I'm here to tell you my dad is. And when I tell them that, they get this really puzzled, confused look on their face. And they usually come back with a response something like, "Come on now, you gotta be kidding me, right? How's that even possible?" And then my story begins, and I tell them about your great granddaddy, Papa Crane. Here's what I tell them. What I mean is that my dad is actually related to the real world POW camp that became eventually the inspiration behind the Hogan's Heroes TV series. My dad's given name is also Bob Crane, and I am his junior. But our last name, Crane, is spelled a little different than the actors. Ours is C-R-A-I-N, while the actor's last name is spelled the more common way, C-R-A-N-E. But the really big difference is that my dad was really a prisoner of war. And in Germany, too. He was a POW for almost 2 years. He was only 17 and a half years old when he was captured by the Germans. But before I tell you more about my dad's true story, let me first tell you about how this Bob Crane's POW camp would become the foundational inspiration for the other Bob Crane's POW camp depicted in Hogan's Heroes. No doubt the Hogan's Heroes TV show was a very popular and successful series. But few people know the Hogan's Heroes series was brought to life because of a well-known movie that was released in 1953. The movie was about the real-world experiences of Army Air Corps prisoners in a place called Stalag 17B in Krems, Austria, my dad's POW camp. The movie was titled Stalag 17. The movie Stalag 17 starred a famous actor. His name was William Holden, a handsome and charming guy. Holden played an unpopular and cynical POW. Another famous actor in the movie, Peter Graves, played the nice guy, but his character becomes complicated by the movie's end. You might remember Peter Graves from his famous role later in the TV series Mission Impossible, very popular in the mid to late 60s, long before Tom Cruise. William Holden won the Academy Award's Best Actor in 1954 for his leading role in Stalag 17. You can find Stalag 17 today on Amazon Prime. Even though it's a dated production, I think even today you will find it quite entertaining. But Papa, how did your dad end up a prisoner of war in the real Stalag 17? Well, that's an interesting story, Manny. But can you believe it? I didn't even know the answer to that question until I was graduating from flight school. I heard the answer to that question for the first time in my life on the night of my graduation from the Army Helicopter Pilot School. The date was June 6, 1968. I remember that date clearly because it was the day after Bobby Kennedy was assassinated out in California. He was running for the presidency of the United States. Our day had started bittersweet. We were on the one hand very excited we were finally going to become Army Warrant Officer helicopter pilots. But on the other hand, we were sad because of the loss of a great man, Bobby Kennedy. So, that day has always been a very memorable one for me. I had grown up as a boy knowing that Dad was a POW in World War II. But like so many other combat veterans, he didn't talk about it. All I knew I had learned from my mother. My dad had come to my Army Aviation School graduation out in Georgia. He was proud that I was graduating and getting my wings. Because he was recognized by the flight school commandant as a World War II hero, he was given the honor of pinning my hard-earned wings upon my chest. I was 21 years old then. I'm 78 years old now. And to this day, I still reflect on the impact of that very special moment between me and my dad. But what really made that day special was not the flight school graduation ceremony or even the graduation ball that night. Nope. It was the all-nighter I spent with my dad after the day's celebrations had ended. On my way to my room, I had stopped by his motel room to just check on him and see how he was doing before the night's end. That stop by his room turned out to be one of the most important events in my life. Because for the first time in my life, my dad told me his war story in his own words. We talked all night until daybreak. It was intense, and we drank lots of coffee. Dad had started his war story by telling me he had just been promoted to tech sergeant. That was important because he wanted to be the crew chief on his B-17, and a flight engineer was required to be a tech sergeant. He sewed on his new stripes the night before his last mission. And with that promotion, he was assigned flight engineer and very proud when he boarded the aircraft that fateful morning. His B-17 was named Tondaleo after the sultry actress Hedy Lamarr, the sexy character in the movie that was popular at that time called White Cargo. He said their nose art was Mrs. Lamarr sitting buck naked on top of a bomb. Very revealing, but very sexy. New to the squadron, the B-17B Tondaleo was that day going to fly her 5th mission over Germany. It was going to be the deepest penetration and the lowest level bomb run up to that date. It was a clear, cool October day in 1943. As Tondaleo approached her target that day, the flak was about normal, Dad reported. The fatal blow, however, came when the sky filled with German fighters. They were everywhere, he said. That station was on the top turret with a .50 caliber machine gun. He said the fighters were coming at them fast from every direction. He was constantly on the trigger. But the gun got hot, too hot, and jammed. Dad said for many years after the war he had nightmares about that .50 jamming. It would wake him up in the middle of the night thinking about it or dreaming about it. But he came to accept eventually that it probably didn't really matter, because moments after his guns jammed, they lost 2 engines due to flak and couldn't hold their altitude for much longer. Of his crew of 10 men, 6 got out, 4 perished in Tondaleo. Dad narrowly made it out through the bomb bay doors, he told me. He said his exit from those doors, the Bombay area was violent. And on his way down, he badly injured his back. I think I passed out for a few moments, Bobby, on the way down, because I woke up on the ground with a farmer pressing his hay fork in my chest, shouting, "Rouse, rouse," something like that, he said. A few days later, he arrived at Stalag 17B. He would be a POW there at Stalag 17B until early May in 1945. He was all of 17 and a half years old when he walked through those gates of Stalag 17B. I hung on his every word. In those special moments that night, I had finally heard all there was to hear about my dad's war. As I was walking out the door, filled with tremendous pride, he had finally shared his war story. He said, "Wait a minute, I need to tell you one more thing." He said, "Bobby, please hear me. Remember this, to always treat your air crewmen, the crew chiefs, the mechanics, and the gunners. Always treat them with dignity and respect, and above all, humility." I have never forgotten those words. Dignity, respect, humility. My dad said, "You may be one of the officers in charge someday, and those men may have to salute you. But, son, never forget this. Those same men are really your fellow teammates. They're your brothers. They will keep your aircraft safe to operate. They will fire their guns in defense of your life and theirs. Those men will keep you alive. Bobby, never forget this truth. They are your ticket back home." I took those words to heart. I realized I was truly fortunate to have a dad that was a combat-tested airman. Well, there you have it, Manny. You can see my pride swells over for a dad that was a fellow Army Air Corps aviator. He inspired me more than he ever knew. I just wanted to be a good example. I wanted to be a good son. As I left his room that morning, he ended our father-son bonding night by saying to me, "Bobby, just get back home alive, will you?" So, Dad, I hope you can hear me. Here's to you. I will always be grateful to you for sharing your wisdom of how to survive the violent storms of combat. I know I made it back to this world because of your wise guidance that night I graduated from flight school. And I thank you also, Dad, for your engaging lessons of life. Those lessons taught me well the values and morals which have made me the man I have become. I love you as only a very proud son can love a caring father. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I miss you.